Okay, everyone. Good evening. It is Sunday, and we are going to take a look at synthesis and reading charts and graphs. Just trying to make sure that everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. Screen is on, mute is off, and I believe we are good to go. So good evening, everyone. This is synthesis and reading graphs. So what is synthesis? One of the question types that you'll see on the SAT reading test is called synthesis. These questions ask you to draw conclusions and make connections between two related passages or between passages and informational graphics. Informational graphics, fancy word for tables, charts, pie graphs, bar graphs, informational graphics. So, and synthesis is, again, another fancy word for putting it all together, making your conclusions and coming to the conclusions that the author wants you to conclude. So, what should you expect? During the SAT reading section, you will see one or two graphs, tables, or charts paired with one history or social studies passage and one science passage. These visual representations will ask you to analyze the quantitative information. Quantitative means the numerical value. Quantitative means numerical value. So you will analyze the quantitative information in the image and relate those details to the information in its paired textual passage. So you're going to take the numbers from the chart and you're going to compare it to what is actually being said in the passage. Although the questions although the questions asked are similar, the form of each SAT reading graphic brings unique individual challenges. To ensure you can analyze each type of visual representation, be sure to incorporate the strategies that we are going to lay out for you. And I have no idea why it says add a little of body text, but there you go. So here's the strategy. When you're approaching your SAT reading graphs, tables, charts, you need to pay close attention to each detail. Now, remember we had a discussion last week about speed. So if you're going to spend time on something, paying a close attention and detail to your actual chart is where you want to spend the time. If you misinterpret one label, you risk skewing the entire understanding of the graph and then open yourself up to a series of mistakes when you go to answer your questions. So to prevent these errors, we strongly advise you to annotate each image. Annotate, big fancy word for mark it up. Use your highlighter. Come up with a coding system. And, obviously I'm going to give you a coding system, but you can come up with your own coding system so that you can easily pick apart a graph so that it's done quickly and efficiently, but you're doing it in a way that allows you to be able to get the best answer when you go to answer your questions. So by taking the time to annotate or mark up your chart, you emphasize key information and create helpful notes that can be referred to when you're answering the question. First, you should take the time to circle some key areas on the graph. Absolutely. I would suggest you bring a highlighter or have a highlighter with you. Make sure when you come to class on Tuesday night that you bring a highlighter. You're going to need it. While different tables, graphs, and charts have unique areas of focus, you should always circle the title and the things that are being compared. So the axis labels and the column headers. So that's your X and your Y axis, or the titles that go across the left-hand side and across the bottom. And then, of course, your title at the top. Additionally, you'll want to take some time to write an annotation or a little note for the following questions next to the image. So, what is the image representing? Although you might be able to skip this point if the title is simple, the SAT reading section often uses wordy titles to force students to demonstrate visual literacy. Means that it's not going to be something short and quick and easy. It's going to probably be a 2 or 3 part title, so be careful. Take the time to write a clear title to ensure you know exactly the information that's being represented. What conclusions do you draw from the image? Although this is a tremendously important question to annotate, don't waste time writing a paragraph long response. Instead, spend your time writing around 10 clear and concise words or symbols detailing the main idea produced by the information represented. So when you come to class on Tuesday, what we're going to do is kind of like the same activity where we deconstructed passages to get meaning, but this time we're actually going to deconstruct graphs. So that way you can come up with a quick title or revision title so that you can make your main points as to what the conclusions are, and then annotate it. I'll show you how to annotate it in just a little bit so that you can go ahead and answer the questions. So what is the image's relationship to the paired textual passage or the other image? So this annotation does not need to be long. In fact, long is bad. Remember, we need to do this with some degree of speed. So simply put, if it agrees, put a plus sign. If it disagrees, put a negative sign or a minus sign. And if it doesn't relate, just put a slash mark, or like to say that it's neutral. Okay, so plus if you agree, minus if you disagree, and slash if it's not related or it's neutral. Since graphical representations in the SAT critical reading section are used in conjunction with another passage, this quick annotation will be extremely helpful when you go to synthesize the questions. So these quick annotations are extremely helpful in focusing on key information. Although this is a great starting point, it is important to also study different types of graphical representations you will see on the SAT reading section. So for the purpose of this presentation that we're doing tonight, plus means you agree, minus is disagrees, and a slash mark means it's not related. And then we'll tie it all up together in a few minutes. So what are the different types of graphs that you're going to see? To ensure SAT prep adequately prepares you for visual data representations on the SAT reading section, it's important to know the different types of graphs, tables, and charts that you'll encounter. To help you in your SAT review, we have compiled a list of some of the data representations you might encounter with example annotations and tips. All of these images are from practice tests released by the College Board, so it's exactly like what you're going to see. So because tables can be displayed in a varied range of information, they're extremely common for both history, social studies, and science passages. So a table can be used in history, social studies, and science passages. Along with the table itself, make sure to pay attention to the footnotes and citations below the table. References to a table source will help you determine the author's intent or relation to the first passage. Additionally, footnote statements with phrases like "the table above shows" will help you quickly determine the table's main purpose. So in this particular case, you do not have a footnote, which would be somewhere down here. The only footnote that there is says that the information source is coming from the College Board, and it doesn't have a citation or a reference down below. If you're looking, let's take a look at the table. So looking at the table, here you've got the percentage of colonies affected by pathogen. Now, pathogen, I'm assuming, is some kind of scientific word, and then it's divided up into categories. So you've got your pathogen, and then you've got viruses and fungal. That's kind of gross. Anyways, and then in your next column, you've got colonies with colony collapse disorder by percentage, which is important for you to realize. So this says 83%, 100%, 90%, 100%. Colonies without colony collapse disorder, and again, it's in percentages, and it reads 5%, 76%, and so on. So step one, it's easy. You just need to circle. You can circle, you can use a highlighter. The things that you need to circle: number one, title, pathogen occurrence in honeybee colonies. That's the actual title. Things being compared. So you've got the pathogen and then the colonies that are affected by the pathogen. The footnote needs to be circled. The table shows for colonies with blah, blah, blah. Now, in this particular case, some of the information here was cut off. Obviously, there would have been a title up here, and it looks like there probably was a footnote down below. But the first step is always to circle. So circle your title, pathogen occurrence in honeybee colonies, the things that are being compared. So you're comparing the pathogen to the percentage of colonies affected by the pathogen and those that weren't. And then the footnote, the table shows for colonies with, and then it goes on. The second step that you need to do is annotate. So this is where you're going to mark it all up. So what is the image representing? Well, the image is representing a percentage of colonies with collapse disorder versus colonies without collapse disorder. So percentage colony with collapse disorder and non-collapse disorder with bees infected by the pathogens. Okay, so that's something that you would need to write down. What conclusion do you draw from the image? Individual pathogens in both, more in the, I keep forgetting the title name, colonies with colony collapse disorder, and no in non-colonies with all pathogens. Yeah, you guys have to write this test. Okay, so writing information about the conclusions, and then what is the image's relationship to the text? So here's where you annotate. If the passage is, and here's three possible options. A description of a colony's collapse disorder. Well, the annotation is probably going to be a slash because it doesn't really, it doesn't necessarily match or agree. An argument that pathogens have nothing to do with colony collapse disorder. Well, we know from the table that that's not true, so you're going to put a minus sign there. And C, a research paper showing the relationship between pathogens and colony collapse disorder. This is the most likely of what the graph is representing by way of comparison to the text. So this is where you're going to put a plus sign. Okay, so the annotation of the slash, the minus sign, or the plus sign goes beside the table because it's going to tell you whether or not you're making a note to yourself to tell yourself whether or not the table supports the text. Does it have anything to do with a description of colony collapse disorder? No, it doesn't. Does it argue that pathogens have nothing to do with colony collapse disorder? No, that's completely false. I disagree. That's a minus sign. Is it a research paper showing the relationship between pathogens? Yes, it is. And it matches, so therefore you're going to put a plus sign. Line graphs are going to work in the exact same way. On the SAT reading section, you are likely to encounter different types of line graphs. The first form of the line graph that displays change over time, these graphs are usually paired with history and social study passages and will illustrate things like change in population over time. For science passages, line graphs are commonly used to show a range of results from an experiment or a study. As a side note, whenever you see a question about a specific year, take the time to draw a line with your pencil from the year on the x-axis, which is your time, to the line so you can see the exact points where the line intersects. This quick tactic can help you avoid mistakes that result from the rush of SAT testing. So make sure you go back and you study this particular section right here. As a side note, whenever you see a question about a specific year, take the time to draw a line with your pencil from the year on the x-axis to the line so that you can see the exact point where the lines intersect. This can help you avoid mistakes. All right, so here's an example from either history or social studies. The title is Regular Coffee Profits Compared to Fair Trade Coffee Profits in Tanzania. So you can see that the title is a little bit more lengthy. Again, you're going to go ahead and you're going to circle this because it's giving you some important information. You're going to come over here. The amount is the next title, US cents per pound. Okay, how many cents per pound? This is money, the amount right here. So you're going to circle this title. And then, of course, you've got the year right here. You circle the year. Fair trade coffee, you've got yourself a table, so pay attention. Fair trade coffee is indicated by the dash in the circle, and regular coffee is with the hard line. And then, check this out. Here's your footnote, and this should tell you something, and it needs to be circled. This is adapted from the Fair Trade Vancouver website. Now, think about this for a second. If it's been adapted from the Fair Trade Vancouver website, and they're looking to do an analysis, a comparison of coffee profits compared to fair trade coffee profits in Tanzania, regular to fair trade, chances are they're going to have it the data represented in a way that is trying to prove a particular point or persuade you to think a certain way as it pertains to fair trade, because those are the people that are publishing the results. So it's not an independent third party who's publishing this. It's not the regular coffee people. It's the fair trade coffee people that are publishing it. So that's where it becomes really important for you to check out those footnotes. So the first thing you do, circle your title, circle your title, circle your title, make note of which one is fair trade, which one is regular coffee, and make sure you get this little piece down here adapted from Fair Trade Vancouver website. So as it states, first thing you're going to do is circle, and then you're going to annotate. Again, what is the image representing? Is it representing fair trade versus regular coffee profits by year? What conclusions are you drawing from the image? Fair trade coffee profits equals higher, more consistent. What is the image relationship to the paired text passage? If the passage is A, a description of Tanzanian coffee sales, then chances are you're going to use a slash because it doesn't really apply. If the passage is an essay on the idea that regular coffee is more profitable than fair trade coffee, then that's definitely not what it's trying to communicate. So it's going to be a disagree or a minus sign beside your table. And C, if a research paper detailing the success of fair trade coffee sales over regular coffee sales, then you've got exactly what the passage is speaking to, and that's where you're going to put a plus sign. Okay, so your annotation should look something like fairly quick. You're writing it on your paper, on your test, beside your table and your chart, where you're physically circling the different titles. What does the image represent? Fair trade versus regular coffee profits by year. What conclusions? Fair trade coffee, higher, more consistent. And what is the image in relationship to the passage? You're going to put a plus sign because it is in support of a research paper detailing success of fair trade over regular coffee. If it has nothing to do with it or you completely disagree, then you have to put the minus sign. If it's about this description of Tanzania's coffee sale, then you have to put the slash mark because the graph doesn't represent or match or pair up in any way with the passage. So it's not always going to be a plus sign. It could be a slash, it could be a minus sign that you need to put. That's where we'll do some practice activities together. Here's another example. This is a science example this time. So again, here's our information. We've got a total plasma cholesterol in 7 bears. So total plasma cholesterol in 7 bears. So there's your title. And here's your measurement in milligrams. So that's your title. And then you've got 2 things happening down here. You've got when the bears are in hibernation, and you have when the bears are active. And then you've got something else happening here, this maximum desirable level for humans. So pay attention to that. Again, the process is the same. Title, circle it, total plasma cholesterol in 7 bears. The things that are being compared, hibernation, bears in hibernation versus active bears, and their cholesterol in the units of measure in the milligrams or the deciliter. When you go to annotate, what is the image representing? The image is representing 7 bears plasma levels either during hibernation versus when they're active. So it's the same 7 bears. So when they're hibernating and when they're active, and then what is their cholesterol level? What conclusions do you draw from the image? Bears have lower plasma cholesterol when they're active, and that obviously makes sense. What is the image's relationship? What is the image's relationship to the text? So again, if the text is a description on how to take the cholesterol level of bears, it's not related. You would just put a slash mark. If the text is an essay on the consistent cholesterol level of bears while hibernating and when active, that's completely false. So you need to put a minus sign. An argument advocating for the relationship between plasma cholesterol levels and the hibernation of animals, obviously that one makes the most sense, and the image's relationship compared to the text matches, therefore you put a plus sign. Guess what, guys? This is all going to be basically the same strategy that you want to use over and over and over again. It's all about strategy and how you can cut your way through this test, getting as much detail as possible, moving as quickly as possible while being able to accurately answer your questions. So bar graphs shouldn't be any different. These visual data representations appear pretty straightforward. Bar graphs are commonly misinterpreted, however, because students misread the labels or the units. That's why we're having you circle the labels or the units. To counter this error, practice annotating the bar graphs during your SAT reading prep. Additionally, you should take time to write exactly what each bar represents on the top of each bar. So they're asking you to go a little bit further on your bar graphs. In doing so, you provide yourself with an easy point of reference when answering the questions. So here's the bar graph. Givers perceived and recipients' actual gift appreciations. So there's your title, and you're going to circle it, and they're comparing two groups of people, the giver's perception and the recipient's actual gift appreciation. So I give you something, and I want to know how much you actually appreciate the gift that I'm giving you. But it's all based on the giver's perception, my perception of your response. So if you're jumping out of your pants with joy because I just gave you for free an Apple iWatch, then I would probably rank you pretty high, way up here as a level 7. If you just kind of look at me like, really, Boudreaux, that's the best you got, then I guess my perception of the sarcasm or the remark would be way down here based on how you responded. But is that actually what we're looking at here? Let's keep reading. The mean appreciation tells me on average how much they appreciated the gift. Comparing the perception of the giver and comparing how the recipient actually felt, right here. The role is either the giver or the recipient, but take a look at this. This is where they want you to actually write out on top of the bars so you don't get confused. So the black bar right here, this is for your less expensive gift. This one here, the light gray, this is for your more expensive gift. So I would write right here on top, more expensive gift, less expensive gift, less expensive gift, more expensive gift. And so if I were to actually read this chart, it would probably tell me that the giver perceived the receiver as being less grateful or less appreciative when the gift was less expensive. When in fact, the recipient says that's not true. Not only do I appreciate the less expensive gift, I actually appreciate it more than you think, or even more than the expensive one. The giver here perceives or thinks that you appreciate more expensive gift. And the recipient says, well, not really. It's fairly equal. Any gift is appreciated, but actually they appreciated the less expensive gift. So for this data graphic, you need to circle the title. There it is. The things that are being compared. When it says role, it means givers and receivers, and then how much they appreciate. So those are the two things being compared. And then the legend is important. It needs to be circled because this is what's distinguishing your bars. The less expensive gift compared to the more expensive gift. So you're actually doing a four-way comparison. Next, what is the image representing? It represents appreciation levels for less and more expensive gifts. What conclusions do you draw from the image? Givers think expensive are better, and recipients appreciate less expensive than more. What is the image's relationship to the text? If the text says, this is an essay on the cost of gifts in Nebraska, it's completely unrelated and therefore you would put a slash mark. If it's an advertisement emphasizing the importance of giving expensive gifts, well, that's not it at all. So there's your minus mark, or you completely disagree. And if it's a story about a woman that discovers her friends appreciate inexpensive, thoughtful gifts more than expensive jewelry, then chances are you have a match, and therefore you put a plus sign beside your graph. Pie charts are extremely common on the SAT and will be found in science, history, and social studies passages. The key to these visual data representations is attributing the right portion to the correct title. Although it would be redundant to circle every individual title, if you are asked about a specific section of the pie chart, use your pencil and shade that region so it's clear to the eye. It would be a lot clearer if the picture was clearer for you. It didn't come out too well here. However, here's two pie graphs. Figure 1, the title, Primary Occupancy of Public Transportation Passengers in U.S. Cities. So you're obviously going to circle that. Figure 2, Purpose of Public Transportation Trips in U.S. Cities. So it's comparing two different things, okay? This is asking you primary occupation of public transportation passengers in US cities. So why are people taking public transit? Who is it? Who's taking it? This is the who is taking it. So the employed outside of the home, 72%. Unemployed students, the homemaker, retired people, and other. And then where are they going? What's the purpose? Okay. And don't forget, in a pie graph, you're always dealing with percentages, and the percentage should always equal 100%. So in this particular case, you have the majority of people are off to work. You've got other here, personal, business, medical or dental, shopping, social, and school. So who's going to take public transportation and where are they going? That's what you're comparing. So first thing you need to do is circle primary occupation of public transportation passengers in U.S. cities and the purpose of public transportation trips in U.S. cities. What are the images representing? Well, it's representing people's jobs and the reason they use public transportation. What conclusions do you draw from the image? That people use public transportation to go to work. What is the image's relationship to the text? If the text is about a description of public transit available in the United States, it has no relationship to each other, therefore it's a slash. If it's an article arguing that students never use public transit, that's false. Completely disagree, therefore it's a minus sign. If it's a research paper on an American worker and their need to use public transportation to get to work, that makes the most sense. Then it would be a plus sign because the table or the two pie graphs and the passage match. Because they can be about anything, models, these visual data representation are the curveball of SAT reading graphics. Don't you love the curveballs? And I love it how they use baseball analogy in your SAT. That should please all my baseball fans out there. Which, by the way, we're not talking about Cleveland Indians on Tuesday, just saying. So, models can be anything from scientific charts to maps showing population distribution. Anything from scientific charts to maps showing population distribution. Since there's no way to know what you'll see on the SAT reading section, it is important to clearly answer the 3 annotation questions. Because these annotations will be harder and more complex than the other data images, remember to practice them in your SAT prep, which we will do on Tuesday. So let's take a look at this. Orientation of the hatchling loggerheads tested in magnetic fields. So you have the complete circle here. It's being measured in degrees. And you have West Atlantic, Puerto Rico, and you have the East Atlantic, Cape Verde Islands. And I believe hatchling, I think we saw this last year when we did the SAT, and I believe the hatchling loggerheads are actually turtles, and it relates to and the magnetic fields and how it moves them to the areas that they need to be in, depending on what time of year it is and when they lay their eggs and all that good stuff. So, and it's actually the Earth's magnetic fields that let them know when it's time to move. So this is when the two charts that they're comparing, and it's West Atlantic versus East Atlantic. So for this data graphic, you need to circle the title, which is there, the things that are being compared, West versus East, and the footnote, which, did it get cut off? I believe it did. The footnote is the orientation hatchling loggerheads tested in a magnetic field versus the arrow in each circle indicates the mean direction. So I'll read that again. Orientation of hatchling loggerheads tested in a magnetic field, and the arrow in each circle indicates the mean direction. So what are the images representing? The images are representing the direction the hatchlings are swimming in the magnetic fields. What conclusions do you draw from the image? Turtles in the West Atlantic swim northeast. So West Atlantic, northeast. And I'm sure now you can see where the turtles are going in the East Atlantic. They are what? Southwest? There you go. Turtles in the East Atlantic are swimming in the southwest, or in that direction. What is the image's relationship to the passage? If it's a study on loggerhead swimming habits, that's not it. Puts a slash. Has nothing to do with their swimming habits. Backstroke, front stroke, freestyle, butterfly, I don't know. But it is not related, and therefore it gets a slash. If it's an article arguing loggerheads always swim to the magnetic north, well, that's completely a false statement, and it's disproven. It doesn't match. The table does not match. If it's a research paper arguing that loggerheads change their migration pattern based on the magnetic fields, then obviously it's a plus sign. So what kinds of questions will you be asked? Now that you understand the different SAT reading graphics, the next step in your SAT prep is to practice the specific question types that you'll see on the SAT reading section. Because data images appear with a paired passage, you will be able to demonstrate, you must be able to demonstrate your ability to analyze quantitative information and synthesize that knowledge with what you learned from the passage. Although this seems like a daunting task, if you've taken the time to annotate your graphics, you should have already highlighted key details for the question. So here's some question types that you're going to see. Support questions. The data in the graph provides the most support for which idea in the text? Okay, so there's your question. Data in the graph provides the most support for which idea in the text? Similar to textual evidence questions found throughout the SAT reading section, this question type wants you to identify the conclusions you've drawn from the data image and apply them to an idea from the paired textual passage. So I'm going to say that again. They want you to identify the conclusion from the graphic to the passage, the idea from the passage. In answering this question type, reference your annotation to the question. What conclusions can be drawn from the image? Although you should read every answer choice throughout the SAT test, it is especially important to look at each option for support questions. Since the question is asking you which representation provides the most support, and there's that tricky piece again, because again, you're going to get those answers where they look very similar, but they're looking for the one that provides the most. There may be other choices that make some sense, so don't get distracted by those choices. They're looking for those high levels of inference. You should always pick the answer choice that is most directly supported by the data image. So I'm going to say that again. You should always pick the answer choice that is most directly supported by the data image. So the question is, the data in the graph provides the most support for which idea in the text? So this is the one that you need to be looking at. What conclusions do you draw from the image? So the data in the graph provides the most support for which idea in the text? A, givers perceive a lower level of appreciation for a less expensive gift, while recipients display a higher level of appreciation for more expensive gifts. We'll go back to the graph. You know that's not true. This is true based on that statement. This is false. Although givers perceive that more expensive gifts will result in higher appreciation, recipients show higher appreciation for less expensive gifts. Well, let's go back to the chart. Yes. And a higher level, yes. So that's a definite possibility. And here you can see correct answer, but we'll read the last two. Givers anticipate appreciation levels. They're identical to the receiver's actual appreciation. Okay, well, there you go. That's definitely not true. And D, receivers don't appreciate expensive gifts. Looking at the graph, that's not true. So the only possible answer is this B right here, because you've already drawn it out. Givers think expensive is better, while recipients appreciate the less expensive gifts. And what does B say? Givers perceive more expensive gifts, and recipients show a higher appreciation for less expensive gifts. So if you've done your annotation properly, the answer should be crystal clear for you. The next type of question is called explicit meaning questions. According to the graph, which statement is true about the amount of in? These questions ask you to provide your ability to correctly read information from the visual data representation. Put simply, these questions ask you to look at the graph and deduce a specific piece of information and relate it to an idea or a line in the text. Okay, so they're looking for you to be able to find a specific piece of information and relate it to the idea in the text. All right, so let's take a look at this. We're looking at the fair trade coffee versus regular coffee. And let's see the question. According to the graph, which statement is true about coffee profits between 2004 and 2005? Remember the cardinal rule. As soon as they give you a date, draw a direct line from the date through the graph. Okay, just like what they've done here in the blue. So there's 2005 2004, and then here's 2005. Okay, and you can see here that regular coffee had a jump, and fair trade coffee remained pretty much the same, at the same level there. Okay, so according to the graph, which statement is true about coffee profits between 2004 and 2005? A, regular coffee recorded a profit of 60 cents per pound. Well, that's not true. Looks like they went up by about 20 cents right here, from 20 cents to 40 cents. Fair trade coffee vastly exceeded its previous profits. Didn't do anything, didn't even move. So it didn't exceed, it didn't decrease, it didn't grow, stayed the same. So that's definitely not true. Okay, you can see that this says correct answer. But fair trade coffee profits remain steady. This is true. D, Tanzania experienced an especially hot summer. Well, okay, you get the idea. But the key there is making sure that you draw the lines. And you can even add a quick little notation when you draw the lines from the question. You can see that there's an increase here and that this stayed relatively the same. And then you go on to the question. Response questions. The authors would most likely attribute the in the graph as, okay, remember, look who's in charge, it's the authors. So the response questions require students to utilize their inferencing skills to figure out how one author would respond to another. Typically, the question will ask you how the author of the text passage would respond to the data or conclusion drawn by the SAT graphic. Make sure to be straightforward with your answer choices. The SAT will provide you with clear textual support for inferences. So let's take a look at this. So this one is about the honeybee colonies. And basically what it's asking us to do is to give an answer. And these are response questions. I don't think you guys are going to be doing response questions. But essentially what you would be looking at in terms of the response is that the research paper is showing a relationship between the pathogens and the colony collapse disorder. And essentially that's what you're looking at. And that's the relationship that you're trying to draw. And what are they most likely to interpret from this particular graphic is that colonies with the collapse disorder, the bees are highly affected with the collapse disorder. When the pathogen is introduced. So I believe that concludes, it concludes our SAT prep video for tonight. Here's what I want you to do. I would like you to make sure that you have a highlighter with you. We're going to be doing some graphing, and we're going to start tearing them apart in terms of the 3 different questions, the annotation styles, and then we'll pick apart the questions, and hopefully that will be able to help you with some of those questions that you were struggling with that you made note of in last class. And we're going to pick that apart. Chances are we are not going to have a big long test, because I might want to start into either doing some of your into some of the writing conventions, or what I may also end up doing is providing you a brief instruction on some of those other areas of difficulties that you're encountering as it pertains to reading. So there's not going to be a big timed test, I believe, next class, but there are going to be a number of very important activities so that you know how to pick apart these graphs. Okay, I believe that's all for tonight. I hope you all have a fantastic Sunday evening. Happy Monday to you. I will see you on Tuesday at 6 o'clock at the WFCU at A21. Until then, have a great week.